My wife passed away. Her wealthy boss called me and said, "I found something. Come to my office right now." Then he added, "And don't tell your son or your daughter-in-law. You could be in danger." It had barely begun to process the news of her death when this call came through. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, and all I could do was hold the phone tightly, trying to steady myself. My mind raced. What could this man want from me at a time like this? But I couldn't shake the urgency in his voice. The way he had said danger hung over me like a thick, suffocating cloud. It didn't make sense. Who would want to harm me now, after all that had happened? Yet, there was something about his tone that made me wonder if I was missing something important. I told myself to focus, to keep it together, even though every part of me was falling apart. The funeral was tomorrow. I had already dealt with the arrangements, but this was different. His something I hadn't anticipated. I didn't even know how to begin to prepare for it. I drove to his office in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The road was a blur, and the city seemed unfamiliar, distant. My mind kept returning to the words he'd said, repeating them over and over in my head. What had he found? Why did he want me to come alone? What danger was there? When I arrived, I was immediately shown into his office. He was standing by the door, his expression grim, almost unreadable. "You came," he said flatly, his eyes scanning me like he was trying to gauge my reaction. "What is this about?" I asked, trying to sound calmer than I felt. My throat was dry, and I could barely force the words out. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped aside, gesturing toward the desk. I noticed a thick envelope sitting there open. The paper was white, too pristine. One haze dropped to it, but before I could say anything, he spoke again. "I'll let you see for yourself," he said, his voice low, as if he were worried someone might overhear. I stepped forward cautiously, my feet heavy. Got closer. I saw the name on the document, my wife's name, but it wasn't just any document. It looked like something official. Something important. I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I slid the paper out of the envelope. The first line hit me like a punch to the gut. I had no idea what I was looking at, but it was clear this wasn't a simple will or life insurance document. There was a strange sense of finality in the room now. Something had shifted, and I felt the weight of it pressing on my chest. I tried to make sense of the words on the page, but my mind couldn't focus. The sentences blurred together. He watched me, waiting. The silence stretched between us, thick with expectation. Then, I saw it. My heart nearly stopped. Standing in the doorway watching me, was someone I never expected to see: my son. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, staring at the man who had caused the very tremors in my world. It wasn't just that I was surprised to see him there. It was the sheer audacity, the blatant disregard for everything that had already transpired. I felt my pulse quicken, an unspoken fury boiling beneath my skin. When I walked into my wife's boss's office, I had expected something, anything that might give me some sense of closure after the wreckage of the last few days. But this was a nightmare I hadn't prepared for. "You're not supposed to be here," I finally managed to say, my voice betraying none of the panic clawing at my throat. A man standing before me, a polished figure in his late 50s with silvered hair, and a suit that cost more than most people's yearly income, was none other than Richard Alford. He was my wife's boss. He had been her mentor, and, as it seemed in that moment, something far worse than either of those things. "Tom," he greeted me with that air of calculated calm I'd come to know all too well over the years. "I think we need to talk. There's something you need to see." I barely registered the words at first. His presence here, in my wife's office, was a slap in the face. But I had no choice but to take a step forward, my legs moving before I could think. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to leave, to go home and bury myself in the grief that already felt like it was swallowing me whole. But I couldn't. Not when there was something so profoundly wrong about the way he stood there, waiting for me. "Don't tell your son or your daughter-in-law," Richard continued, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "You could be in danger. Trust me on this." I didn't know what to think, but I knew one thing: danger. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. What the hell had my wife gotten herself into? What had she been hiding from me? The questions spiraled, each one darker and more dangerous than the last. I moved forward, unable to back down. But as I approached him, something in the way he positioned himself, his stance, the calculated stillness, set off alarm bells in my head. Something was off. And then I saw it. On the desk, beside Richard's hand, was an envelope. Manila, and unmistakably official in appearance. I could almost feel the weight of it pressing against me before I even touched it. A sense of dread settled deep in my stomach as I reached for it. "This is what you need to see," Richard said, his voice low, almost too calm. I ripped open the envelope with trembling hands. The contents were what I expected, and at the same time, nothing like I'd imagined. Papers. Dozens of pages of financial statements, bank transfers, and records I couldn't quite understand at first. But one detail stood out: my wife's name, scrawled across the top of one page, next to a number that made my blood run cold. Is this real? My voice cracked as I looked at him. But Richard only stared at me, his gaze unwavering. That's what I want you to figure out, he said, his voice cool. You should have seen it a long time ago. I felt my world begin to crumble, piece by piece, as I scanned the documents. It wasn't just a mistake, or some misunderstanding. It was deliberate. There's more, Richard added, as though he had been waiting for me to realize the gravity of the situation. Much more. His words were a hollow echo in my head, but I couldn't shake the image of the papers in front of me. Of the financial discrepancies. The money that had been funneled to accounts I didn't know. That didn't even exist anymore. It was all too much to process in that moment. You need to be careful, Tom, Richard warned, his eyes narrowing. This goes deeper than you think. Far deeper. I felt the ground shift beneath me, and for a brief moment, I thought I might collapse. But I didn't. Isfana clenched my fist, the cold hard truth settling into my chest. My wife, everything I had believed about her, was a lie. And Richard was just the beginning. I sat at my desk, the papers spread before me, untouched. The weight of everything that had happened over the past few days hung in the air like a thick fog. One I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. My mind was racing, flicking between moments that felt both too vivid and too distant. Each memory stabbing at me like a cold blade. I thought of how she looked, the way her hands shook when she handed me the letter. A letter that had changed everything. I couldn't help but feel like a pawn in someone else's game. Maybe that was what hurt the most. That I wasn't in control. I hadn't seen him since the day I received the call that had turned my world upside down. Her boss, the man she had worked with for years, had said those words that still echoed in my head. I found something. Come to my office right now. And then the one that terrified me. Don't tell your son or your daughter-in-law. He could be in danger. What could be so important that it was worth the risk? I had to know. But as I drove to his office, my gut twisted with unease. I hadn't seen him since the funeral, and his tone had been too urgent. Something was wrong. I pushed the door open to his office, and there he was. The man who had been a quiet fixture in her life. He wasn't alone though. My eyes froze as I saw who was standing by his side. Come in, he said, his voice tight. There was something in his eyes. Something that made my stomach drop. I stepped inside, my feet heavy with the weight of the moment. What's going on? I asked, but my voice didn't sound like mine. It felt hollow, distant. He motioned to the woman standing beside him. I think you need to hear this from her, he said, his eyes darting from me to her, his expression unreadable. The woman was unfamiliar to me, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her eyes sharp and calculating. She wore a navy blue suit, her posture rigid, as though she was prepared for anything, and I knew instantly, this wasn't just about my wife's death. This was something else entirely. Who are you? I asked, my voice colder now. Sharper. She didn't respond right away, just stepped forward and handed me a file. This is everything, she said, her voice low. What you need to know. I glanced down at the file. The name on the top, making my pulse spike, was my wife's name, but something felt off. Something I couldn't quite place. The silence stretched on as I flipped through the documents, my eyes scanning the pages that detailed everything: accounts, properties, and things I'd never known about. Each one was a slap to the face, a revelation I hadn't been prepared for, but then I stopped on a particular page. My eyes widened, my heart stuttered. It was a signature, her signature. But the date on the document was only a few months ago. How could she have signed this? I was sure she hadn't mentioned anything about it. I hadn't known she was involved in something like this. My mind raced. What was she hiding? Why didn't she tell me about this? I demanded, the file shaking in my hands. When is all of this? The woman finally spoke, her voice steady. Because your wife wasn't who you thought she was. She was involved in things far beyond what you understood. I wanted to scream, to lash out at her for saying such things, but I couldn't. My legs felt weak, my chest tightening with every word she spoke. She was involved in a deal. A deal that could change everything, the woman continued. And she knew it was going to come to light. She knew it was only a matter of time before someone found out. That's why she made plans, but she didn't want you to get dragged into this. But why didn't she tell me? My voice was barely a whisper now. Why keep it from me? Because the woman said, her eyes never leaving mine, if you knew the truth, it could have cost you everything. Her wealth, her power. All of it. She was protecting you. She knew what was coming, but she couldn't stop it. No'd. The words hit me like a freight train, and I couldn't breathe. My head spun with confusion, disbelief, and the sharp, bitter taste of betrayal. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought we had, was being torn apart, piece by piece. What's gonna happen now? I asked, barely holding it together. The woman exchanged a glance with the man before answering. You're gonna have to make a choice. The information in this file is just the beginning. It's up to you what happens next. And just like that, I realized there was no going back. My life had changed forever. I was no longer just a grieving husband. I was a man caught in a web of lies, deception, and power beyond my understanding. But I couldn't back down. Not now. Not when the truth was finally within my grasp. I couldn't breathe. The air in the office felt thick, suffocating, as though the walls were closing in on me. The weight of the moment pressed on my chest, making every inhale a struggle. Standing just beyond the threshold of the door, was someone I never thought I'd see again, my wife's brother, Daniel. His cold eyes met mine, and I felt a sharp pang in my gut. I hadn't spoken to him in years. Not since that day at the hospital when his words tore my world apart. Why didn't you tell me? I managed to force out, my voice barely above a whisper. But the words felt like they came from a different person, someone who wasn't standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for it all to crumble. Anil's mouth twisted into something between a smirk and a sneer. Tell you what, Richard. That your wife was hiding secrets. Secrets that were never meant for you. I stared at him, unable to fully process what he was implying. A heart thudded in my chest, the shock still lingering like a bitter aftertaste. He stepped forward into the room, his presence filling the space, too large to ignore. You always thought she was perfect, didn't you? Daniel said, his voice low, almost mocking. But she wasn't. She was hiding things, Richard. Big things. Things you wouldn't have believed even if I told you. The words burned like acid searing through me. I took a step back, my legs unsteady beneath me. My mind was reeling, caught in the whirlpool of confusion and disbelief. I couldn't trust him, couldn't trust a word that came from him. But a small part of me, a voice I didn't want to hear, wondering if there was some truth to it. What are you talking about? I demanded, my voice stronger now, desperate to keep control, even if my grip on reality was slipping. Daniel's eyes gleamed with something darker. You really don't know, do you? Your wife wasn't just hiding money from you, Richard. She was hiding something bigger. Something that would ruin you. I felt the world tilt. Stop it, I hissed. Just stop. But he didn't. She had a plan to protect herself. And you were nothing but a pawn in it. The words cut through me like a knife. I shook my head, disoriented. What do you mean? What are you trying to say? Daniel stepped closer, his tone lowering to something almost comforting, as though he were confiding in me, rather than taunting me. She had someone else, Richard. Someone she was planning to leave you for. A man who would have taken care of her. You were just there. A placeholder. Did you ever wonder why she was always so distant? Why she never really let you in? She was saving herself for someone else. I stumbled back, the breath leaving my body. The room spun around me, and I couldn't hold on any longer. The pieces of my life, my marriage, they were slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. You lied, I said, my voice weak, barely a whisper. She loved me. No, Richard, Daniel interrupted, his voice cutting through my denial. She loved the idea of you. But she loved him more. And you were too blind to see it. Too caught up in your perfect little life to realize that it was all just a lie. I stood frozen, my mind swirling with images of the past. Of all the times I thought we were happy. We had everything. Was it all just a facade? A story I had told myself because I couldn't face the truth. You don't know what you're talking about, I choked out, even though part of me was beginning to believe him. I had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. Dal didn't need to say anything else. The look in his eyes, the satisfaction on his face as he watched me unravel, told me everything. The truth, the one I didn't want to face, was sinking in. I'm done here, he said, turning toward the door. But before he left, he looked back at me, his voice quieter, almost sympathetic. I hope you find the truth, Richard. Because what you don't know could destroy you. The door clicked shut behind him. And I was left standing in that suffocating silence, my world shattered. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Even as I stood there, numb from the grief that had consumed me since my wife's passing, I couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that something darker was unfolding around me. U.S. James Wilkins, the wealthy CEO, had always been a quiet figure in the background of our lives, a man who I'd never quite trusted. He had been more than just her boss. He was a confidant, a friend, and when she died, he became a strange sort of ally to me. At least, that's what I told myself. But now, standing in his office, I could feel the air crackling with tension. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed to heighten the weight of the silence that hung between us. Well, I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find, but I had a sinking feeling that I was about to uncover something far worse than I could imagine. When I arrived, his assistant had led me straight to his office. James Hamill even bothered with pleasantries. He simply waved me in and shut the door behind us. He didn't offer condolences. There was no sympathy in his eyes, no sorrow for the woman who had been, until her death, his right-hand woman. Now his expression was unreadable, distant, as if he were dealing with something far more urgent than a widow in mourning. You need to see this, he said, his voice low but sharp. I didn't have time to respond before he turned his computer screen toward me. My eyes locked onto the image, a scan of a will. The official document from my wife's estate. But this wasn't the will I had seen before. This one was different. This was her final revision, James continued, tapping a finger on the screen. I thought you should know. She didn't mention it to you, did she? I stared at the document, my heart racing. The legal jargon blurred before my eyes, but I could make out enough to understand what it was saying. Everything had been left to me. Except, there was a stipulation. If I died before her son, everything would go to him. But that was just a detail, right? Something that could be changed in a heartbeat. I felt a flicker of panic rising, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't going to let him see how vulnerable I felt. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me the way he had manipulated her. I don't understand, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Why show me this now? What's going on? His eyes darkened, the faintest glimmer of something sinister flashing behind them. It's what she was hiding from you, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. She found out something about your son-in-law, and when she realized what he was really after. While she knew she had to protect you. My mind raced, my pulse thundering in my ears. My wife had been hiding something from me, and it had to do with Tom, my son-in-law. What are you talking about? I demanded, crow tightening. What did she find? James leaned back in his chair, his hands folding in front of him. He seemed to take pleasure in the tension building in the room, savoring my confusion. I don't know all the details, he said slowly, but she was onto something big. She said it had to do with her business dealings, the merger, the investments she'd made. And your son-in-law. Well, he was getting too close to something she didn't want him to know. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, my mind swirled with the implications of what he was saying. Was this what she had been hiding from me all along? Was it possible that my own family, people I loved and trusted, had been playing me for a fool? I don't believe you, I said, shaking my head, my voice trembling. This is insane. You're trying to manipulate me, to get me to doubt everything. My wife wouldn't have, but James cut me off, his eyes hardening. Don't be so sure, he warned, there's more. A lot more. If you don't want your son-in-law to find out what she really had planned, you need to stay close to me. I can help you. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Every instinct screamed at me to walk out of that office, to get as far away from him as possible. But the nagging feeling in the back of my mind, the one that had been growing ever since I stepped into this world of wealth and secrets, told me I had no choice but to listen. The truth was right in front of me. It wasn't the truth I had wanted. It wasn't the peace or closure I'd been seeking. It was something far more dangerous. Something that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my wife, my family, of the life we'd built together. I stood there, torn between the man I thought I was, and the one I was becoming. And I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. I paced the room, the cold floor beneath my feet offering no comfort. My heart was still racing from the last conversation. I had just discovered the depths of the betrayal that had been kept from me all this time, my wife's secrets, hidden away from even me, her husband. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on me like a storm about to break. The phone call had been a whisper of danger, a final warning that I couldn't ignore. But what was I supposed to do now? My mind raced with the possibilities. Her boss had said you could be in danger, and then left me with that chilling, ominous statement, don't tell your son or your daughter-in-law. Why? Was there something even more sinister behind her death than I could imagine? I tried to steady my breath, but the anger rose in my chest again, burning like a fire. How could she have kept all this from me? My mind kept replaying the moments. I thought I had known everything, our life together, our love. Now, it all seemed like a lie. Was any of it real? Or had I been living a carefully crafted illusion? I felt the cold edge of the letter in my hand again, the one I had almost thrown away in my rush to get answers. It was from her lawyer, but something felt off. The letter had been sent right before her death. It was as if she had been preparing for something that I wasn't privy to. I couldn't shake the feeling that she had known something was coming. Her boss's words echoed in my mind. Come to my office right now. There was a sense of urgency in his voice, but there was also something else, something more unsettling. What was he hiding? Was he in on this too? The thought gnawed at me. I grabbed my coat, determined to get to the bottom of it. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I wasn't going to let fear dictate my actions any longer. I had to confront him. I had to know everything, no matter what it cost me. When I arrived at his office, a tension in the air was almost palpable. He was standing by the door, looking as though he'd been expecting me. But there was no warmth in his expression, no apology, no understanding. Only the cold, calculated gaze of someone who had been holding a secret far too long. He said, his voice low, almost guarded. I wasn't sure you would. Cut to the chase, I snapped, every inch of me vibrating with impatience. What is it you're hiding from me? His eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw something that almost resembled fear, but it was gone too quickly for me to trust it. He motioned for me to sit. This isn't going to be easy to hear. I didn't sit. Instead, I stepped closer, refusing to back down. I've been hearing things, and I'm done with the games. What are you involved in? What did she know? He looked away, clearly struggling with something. His fingers drummed nervously on the desk. She wasn't just a secretary. There's more to her story, far more than you realize. And the people involved. They're dangerous. My heart stopped for a moment, the silence hanging between us like a suffocating fog. Dangerous? What had my wife gotten herself into? Who's involved? I demanded, the urgency in my voice now unmistakable. A family you everything, he replied, his voice trembling slightly. But I can tell you this, your life is in danger. And I'm sorry, but you've already been caught in the crossfire. I stood there, frozen. Every instinct told me to walk away, to let this go, but I couldn't. Not now. Not when everything I thought I knew was unraveling before my eyes. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. You need to be careful. You're not just dealing with a corporate fraud, or embezzlement. This is far worse than that. And they're coming for you next. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stood there in the dim light, barely breathing. My heart pounded, echoing in the silence of the room. The words still rang in my ears. Don't tell your son or your daughter-in-law. You could be in danger. A chill crept down my spine. What was this all about? Why had I been summoned here of all places, on the day of my wife's funeral? I stepped forward, my shoes clicking softly on the polished floor, and as I neared the desk, I saw it, something I wasn't prepared for. There, standing at the door, was the last person I ever expected to see. My wife's boss. The man who had always been a figure of power and influence, now looked more like a shell of the man he used to be. But it wasn't just him that froze me in my tracks. No, it was the woman beside him. The one with a cold, knowing smile on her face. It was my son's wife, Allison. Breathe. My mind raced, the fog of confusion thickening with every passing second. What the hell was going on? The boss nodded at Allison, and looked at me with the same grave expression he had when he'd first called me. I found something, he said in a low voice, his tone heavy with the weight of what he was about to say. Something you need to see. You'll leave me, you're gonna want to see this. But don't tell your son. Not yet. His eyes flicked to Allison again, and I felt a sickening twist in my stomach. What was she doing here? Allison stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. You've been kept in the dark for too long, she said, her voice sickly sweet. You need to know what's really been happening behind your back. I glanced at her, confusion clouding my judgment. What are you talking about? I could barely form the words. It was my wife's legacy, the life she'd built, and now it was all falling apart in front of me. Allison's lips curved into a smile that could only be described as sinister. Your wife wasn't the person you thought she was, she said, her words sending a wave of cold through my veins. She wasn't even the woman you married. I stared at her, my pulse quickening. You're lying. I'm not, she said, her gaze never wavering. But I guess you'll see for yourself soon enough. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder, tossing it on the desk between me and her boss. The man's expression hardened, and I could see the hesitation in his eyes as he met mine. I didn't know what to do. This was also surreal. But I could feel it in my gut. This was something big, something dangerous. My mind whirred with possibilities, none of them good. The boss cleared his throat. You need to understand. This goes deeper than you think. Your wife had a lot of secrets. Secrets that, well, they've been hidden for a long time. I felt a knot in my stomach. What kind of secrets? My voice was barely a whisper. Allison leaned in, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Secrets that could ruin everything for you. Your family. Your business. Everything you thought you knew about her, about your life. It's all a lie. I looked between the two of them, the room feeling smaller by the second. My chest tightened, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely helpless. What the hell is going on? I demanded, my voice rising. The boss took a deep breath. I'm going to show you something, but you need to be prepared. This is going to change everything. I reached for the folder, my hands trembling as I flipped it open. The first page was a letter, written in my wife's unmistakable handwriting. But as I read, the words blurred in front of my eyes. It wasn't just a letter, it was a confession. A confession about her dealings, her lies, and her manipulations. This is impossible, I murmured, the weight of it all crashing down on me. Allison leaned back, watching me with a cold smile. It's all true, and now it's too late for you to do anything about it. Your wife made sure of that. I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in around me. What did this all mean? What had my wife been involved in? And why was Allison here acting like she was part of it? My mind spun, the room spinning with it. The woman I thought I knew had been hiding something this dark, this destructive. The pieces began to click into place, things I dismissed over the years, things that never made sense. Now, a thing was coming to the surface. And I was caught in the middle of a web of lies and deceit. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but I was frozen. The truth was staring me in the face, and I didn't know how to process it. "This can't be real," I whispered, more to myself than to them. Allison smirked, her eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and malice. "Oh, but it is. And now it's time for you to face the consequences." The moment I stepped into that office, the weight of everything I had just learned crashed into me. I should have known. I should have seen it coming. But nothing could have prepared me for the truth that was about to unfold before me. Family there, in the doorway, was not just any familiar face, it was someone I had trusted. Someone I thought was on my side. My breath caught in my throat, my body frozen, as I met his eyes. My late wife's boss, the man who had acted so kind and understanding throughout her illness, now stood there with an expression of guilt and desperation. "Don't tell anyone," he whispered urgently, his voice low. "Not your son, not your daughter-in-law, you're in danger." The words seemed to echo in my head, a stark warning that rattled me to the core. I wanted to scream, demand answers, but I couldn't. I couldn't move, couldn't think clearly. What was happening? What had he done? With a shaky breath, I forced myself to step forward, my pulse hammering in my chest. He backed away from me, motioning for me to follow him into the room. As I walked past him, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a trap that had been set long before this moment. Inside the office, the tension was suffocating. Papers were scattered across the desk, and a file sat open, its contents spilling out, as if they had been hastily shoved aside. But the thing that truly caught my attention wasn't the mess, it was the woman sitting at the desk. Her back to me. She turned slowly as I entered, and when she faced me, my heart dropped. The woman I had known for years. The woman who had always been there, always claimed to have my wife's best interests at heart. But now, standing before me, I saw her for who she truly was: a liar. A manipulator. The air between us grew thick with the weight of betrayal. My mind was spinning, trying to piece everything together, but it all felt like a cruel joke. How could she have done this to us? "You," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "I'm the one who's been behind all of this. You've been manipulating everything from the start." Her eyes narrowed, a cold smile playing on her lips. "You have no idea how deep this goes," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "You think you're the only one who's been played. You're just a pawn in a much bigger game." My hands clenched into fists, the urge to lash out almost overwhelming. But I had to control myself, had to think, this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my family, my future. And I would not let her tear it all apart. I turned to the man, the one who had called me here. His face was filled with regret, but it was too late for that. "Why did you bring me here?" I demanded, my voice cold and steady despite the storm raging inside me. "What is it you want me to do?" He took a deep breath, his eyes darting to the woman at the desk, then back to me. "She's been siphoning money, hiding assets. Everything your wife worked for. It's all been manipulated, hidden from you. You've been the one kept in the dark." I felt the world spin around me. Every word that left his mouth felt like a punch to the gut. It was too much, too fast. My mind was reeling, trying to process the enormity of it all. I had lost my wife, and now I was losing everything she had worked for. Everything I thought we had built together. But I wouldn't let her win. Couldn't. Without thinking, I grabbed the file off the desk and flipped through it, seeing the names, the transactions, the numbers. My stomach churned as I realized the extent of her betrayal. She had been pulling the strings all along. I knew she was going to pay for it. I met her gaze, my voice hard. "You've lost. It's over." The cold smile disappeared from her face, replaced by a look of panic. She stood up, moving toward the door, but I blocked her path. "You can't get away with this," I said, my tone unwavering. "I will make sure everyone knows the truth." Her eyes burned with fury. "You think you can stop this? You're nothing but a fool." I didn't flinch. "Maybe. I'm a fool who's about to ruin everything you've built." The silence between us was deafening. The room felt like it was closing in, the weight of the moment heavy on my chest. But I didn't care. I had taken back control, and no one was going to take that from me. I walked out of the office, leaving behind the shattered remnants of my old life. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I would never let them destroy me.